Hey, babe, can you turn that down though? Yeah, that's good. Hey, what's up, y'all? Getting on a little later than I thought because Bible study just ended. I couldn't remember what time it actually started or what time it was going to end. So, but I'm here. Hey, hey, happy Wednesday. Just getting situated here. I was just saying I got on a little later than I thought because I wasn't sure what time TD Jake's Bible study was ending. Hey, girl. I wasn't sure what time it finished. So I was like, well, I guess we're good. How's your day going, Ashley? Yeah. I remembered to post today the post that I was actually going live. I'm still trying to get used to this, so I still be feeling like I don't know what the heck. like, my day's been pretty good today. Like, I feel like it's one of those days where you feel like you didn't do much, but then you look back and you're like, dang, I've been running around all day, like literally. So, yeah, it's been a day. Like, I know I'm gonna sleep good tonight. Seriously. Oh my God. But girl, listen. I'm gonna go ahead and get started here so I don't be on here forever. So I'll just start what I was gonna talk about today. It's funny though. Listen, I had a whole different idea of what I was gonna come on and talk about regarding like the journey and just what it's like when you're stepping out on faith. But it's like God came in and just did like a whole 360 on what I had planned to talk about. Like just starting from this morning until now. So I'm like, you know what? Okay, then, Lord, like, I'll go ahead and switch it up because apparently this is what you have more on my heart than anything. Um, so, what I really wanted to talk about, I guess, is just spending time with God. How important it is when we spend time with Him and literally, like, not just our regular, like, spending time in prayer, but actually spending time, like, silent sometimes just in His presence. So, okay, let me backtrack. So, this morning, when I first get up, I typically like, I'm talking to God, I'm like praying, just really just spending time with Him, to start my day. And this morning I was like sitting in silence, I said my prayers and everything. And then I was just kind of sitting there silent before God. And I like, it's funny, like I'm sitting there silent, but then I begin to get like these, like a vision, I guess, or like just the imagination, the thought, like my mind is just going. And I have this imagination that I'm sitting with God, my Father, right? I'm sitting with Him. And when I have this vision, it's kind of like me as a child, I guess, with Him, So whenever I usually have these visions with God, a lot of the times, it's me in a childlike form back when I was like maybe 3 or 4. And I think that's for a reason. I think God, again, is really trying to make sure I'm focused on, staying in a child's position in a sense, like making sure that I'm staying in the position of a daughter and not like a worker who's trying to do, whatever to get approval, but a daughter who is already approved by her father. So again, I preface that with a lot of times when God's giving me these different visions or downloads, it's me as a child with Him as my father. So, in this whole little vision, and again, I think at the time I'm thinking that this is like just me coming up with the stuff. Okay. So I'm sitting there with my eyes closed, and I'm having this idea, this vision of just me sitting with my father. So it's like I'm sitting on God's lap. It's 3-year-old me. And I'm like just sitting there. And he begins to tell me like a bedtime story, essentially. So he's telling me the story. And the story that he's telling me is of me, of my life. It's like the story of little Kayla, I guess. So he begins to share with me like this story. And he's saying it in a rhythmic kind of way. And he's talking to me about childhood. He's talking to me about, you know, teenage years and then adulthood until the present day. And what he begins to speak to me about is like Joshua, like in the Bible, So he begins to talk to me about Joshua. He begins to talk to me about, how he's been leading me up to this point and what it is that he's calling me to do and how it is that he's calling me to step out and, speak out like what I'm doing now, actually getting on live, talking to you guys, talking to his children, essentially, you know what I mean? And just encouraging you guys. So he's downloading this whole thing on me. And like when I left out of that time with him, first of all, I was like bawling my eyes out. That's probably why it seems like I did so much today too, because I've cried so many times today, just thanking God and praising God and just being like in awe of him for real. So I leave out of this prayer time, bawling my eyes out, and just thankful in heart. And I kept thinking like, Lord, like, you know what? I got to go over Joshua in the Bible today. Like, I just want to read Joshua. Like, I just need to go back over that and just kind of backtrack and see his journey and see what I can glean from what it is God was showing me through the little vision all day today, right? So I end up running errands. So I say that I get out of my prayer time and then it's like I hit the road. Like it was running errands all day. But as I'm running errands, I usually play like, I'll play something on YouTube or maybe an audible book or something like that. But today I was like, let me get on YouTube. And I was like searching for something to play just while I was riding around. And I came across one of TD Jake's like old messages or whatever. And this message was, I think, from like February 2023. So I look at it and it was all about basically prepping before your purpose or prepping before promise. And I'm like, okay, it kind of caught my attention. I'm like, didn't think nothing of it, but I go to play it. And why, when I play this video, the very thing he begins to speak on is Joshua. He's talking about like just the whole chapter. He's going over it about like how this chapter again is not for the faint of heart because it's all about that journey to the promised land. And Joshua, unlike Moses, is the one who actually got to see it. Like, yeah, he went through all the same things, but Joshua actually got to make it into the promised land. He actually got to see what it is that God was saying. He got to hear from him. He got to direct, God's children and help them to cross over. And so my mind is just blown because I'm like, Lord, like through this whole little vision / like bedtime story that I envision you telling me, early this morning when I'm thinking like, maybe this is just me. Maybe this is just in my mind, whatever. It wasn't. It was God giving me that kind of insight into the season that I'm in, and then drives the point home with a message that I randomly clicked on YouTube, speaking to the very thing that God was saying to me, speaking to the very situation that I'm in. And it just like, it really blew my mind. And he did the same thing, to be honest. They were still talking about Joshua on Bible study tonight. And I'm like, mind is blown. But I say all that to say, it's like, if I would have never took the time to sit in God's presence, like exactly, girl, confirmation, right? If I would have never took the time to really just sit in his presence and sit in silence and see what it was God wanted to download to me, if I wouldn't have took the time to be like, I know I have my prayer requests. I know I have things that are on my heart. I know I have things that I want, but let me just sit here in silence and see what you actually want to say back to me. It's like, if I wouldn't have done that, I would have never got that download. He would have never been able to necessarily confirm the word because he wouldn't have been able to get it to me. It's like, not that he didn't have the word for me, but if I wouldn't have took the time to listen, it's like, how would he get it to me? And I just think that's so important for us who are like literally stepping out on faith. We're out here stepping out on crazy faith, doing things that you don't typically see people do, leaving jobs, quitting without another job, fully relying on God for our finances, pivoting into industries that we weren't necessarily in before. And in this radical shift that we're in, like we literally can't afford to not spend time with God, to not literally sit in silence and see what he's saying to us. Like, it's crazy. Like it blew my mind off. It literally blew my mind. Actually, no, I feel you. I feel you. Seriously, listen, I do that sometimes too. Sometimes I fall back asleep. And what God showed me about that, like I literally did I called it a worship and praise fast, even though it's like I wasn't fasting from worship and praise, but I was trying to get more into it and like be intentional about it. During that time, God was showing me that like when I'm worshiping, when I'm praising, when I'm praying, I don't always have to necessarily say something. Now, it's like a lot of what worship was, I guess for me at the time, worship and praise was like just literally laying down in silence in his presence. Now, the journaling, like I'm with you on that. Like the season that I've been in, I write it all down. I write it all down because it's like I want to document everything that is happening in the season. I don't want to forget it. So I 100% agree with journaling, especially when you're reading your Bible, because God will start to point stuff out to you. And you know how we are. We say we'll remember. Excuse me. We'll say we'll remember, but then we'll get a couple hours down the line and literally forget how he connected everything or what it is that he said to us. So I wholeheartedly agree that we definitely have to like write it down too when you're spending time in prayer. But that silence, dude, that hits a totally different. And I never realized how important it was either. Like, and to be honest, I didn't really start journaling as consistently as I have until like this past December. That's when I really was like, okay, I gotta write this stuff down because I felt like stuff was happening so quickly and God was saying so many things like that were speaking directly to me and right to my season. I'm like, I gotta write it down because I don't want to forget. I want to be able to see the full circle of everything that he's saying so I can see how it like all connects, you know? But like it's just as important to sit in that silent time. And I think I did a video on this before, but like when you're sitting in silence, just trying to spend time with God, just trying to be intentional about it, you'll feel like you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You'll feel like you're supposed to be cleaning, you're supposed to like you got work you begin done, you got schoolwork, you got like all the things. Could be cleaning, whatever. Like you'll think that you should be doing everything else, especially when you sit in silence. Like I don't know why that is. Well, it's probably just the enemy trying to get us distracted and, busy ourselves enough that we don't have to sit and listen to what God is trying to say. But like, it feels so awkward at first when you do it. Like when I first was doing the worship and praise fast and I was like intentional about trying to sit like silently in God's presence, I did feel awkward. But he was like, when you do that, sometimes you might fall back asleep. Like if you get on the floor or you're laying on your back and you're just, laying there with your eyes closed and being intentional about being in God's presence, you're gonna fall asleep sometimes. It's gonna happen. Like, but he's like, that's okay. I want to know that you're comfortable enough with me as your father that you can lay down in my presence and be at rest. Because worship, a lot of the times, is rest. It's not so much doing a whole bunch. It's saying, I trust you enough. I trust that you love me enough that I can sit still in your presence and just rest and allow you to say whatever it is you want to say with me. Or maybe you just want to sit with me in silence. You just want my presence, and I kind of equate that sometimes like, I feel like it's very relational. Like I think about my friendships, the closest ones, you don't always have to talk. The closest friendships that you have, a lot of the times you can sit with that friend and y'all could be doing stuff in the same room, but you don't necessarily have to say anything. Or sometimes you're sitting on the phone, you don't have to say anything all the time. There's a time and a place, but like those people that you really rock with, you don't always have to say something or be speaking in order for like y'all to be good. And that really is the same thing with God. But like I was saying, along this journey though, I've just noticed that like when we're going through so many changes so swiftly and there's so much uncertainty that we're stepping into, like if we don't hear from God, we're not going to know what to do. We're not going to know the strategy. We're not going to know where to go or when to stop. Like we're not going to have any idea of how that works. Hey, what's up, daughter of God? Rerouting me. Yep, I feel that too. Girl, exactly. You never know where he's going to take us. You never know. I'm telling you. And that's exactly why I have to write it down. Like I got my little journal. It's a thick one this time, my little faith journal, but it's kind of thick. But I have ran through, like since December, I probably then ran through like 5 or 6 journals or something like that. Maybe more, to be honest. Like, because it's one of those things. And tell me if y'all feel this way. When you're going through like the journey, right? You're going through it. Do you feel like it's hard to kind of like capture all of what it is that you're going through? Like it's hard to kind of put it into words, everything that you're feeling and everything that you sense God saying to you. Like it's hard to kind of put it into words. So it's like I don't know. I try to write it down the best you can, but it's like it feels so much. Like I remember there were times where people would be like, um, trying to explain the situation. Like they would ask me how things are going or like what I'm currently doing. But when you're stepping out on faith to do something God is calling you to do, you don't always have the response. It's not always like a quick cookie cutter answer. Like it's like how much time you got. Like if you really want to know what's going on with me, it's going to be a little bit more than like a quick, oh yeah, I'm good. Because God does so many things and it's like you're pivoting in so many different directions at once. And you don't really like you just can't quantify it in such a small statement. At least not at this stage. At least not for me. I don't know. Like Ashley, you get it. Like it's just it's real. Like it's a different season for sure. But I know that it's so important to really just make sure we're hearing what God is saying. Like I just kept thinking about how this day went. Like if I would have never sat down and just sat silent, if I would have let like my own thoughts try to tell me like, oh, that's just you making up stuff. Like, well, I guess that's really the enemy saying that. But trying to make you feel like while you're sitting in silence that you're wasting your time. Or while you're sitting in silence, God's not really saying these things to you. That's just you making this stuff up. And God's like, it's not just you. What I said to you is what I said to you. And if you're uncertain, let me confirm it to you like 3 more times during the day. Like it blows my mind when he does that. But like that's why I say I've literally been crying all day. I think I wrote like driving in the car or whatever. I hear this sermon. It's confirming everything God said to me this morning. I'm bawling. I'm sitting outside in the grocery store parking lot, bawling my eyes out. I'm like, I hope nobody sees me. I was like, gonna be like, what the heck is wrong with this girl? But I was just so moved by what God is doing. And it's like, man, y'all, like, again, this journey is not for the faint of heart. And literally, almost that exact phrase is what TD Jakes was saying on the sermon that I randomly clicked on earlier today. He literally was saying that, like, the whole book of Joshua. He's like, those that are like rocking with the book of Joshua, the ones that are in it or find themselves in it, like, it's not for the faint of heart. Because the stuff you find yourself going through when you're stepping out doing something that you haven't seen anybody else do, that feels completely crazy because nobody else is doing it the way God is telling you to do it, it's like, man, you can't explain why certain things hit the way they do. All you know is it is what it is. Like God said what he said, and I'm doing it. And I don't really know what else to tell you. But it's really a season of transition. You want to bet, babe? It's really a season of transition, and just a season of really having to rely fully on God for your next. And like when you're sitting in silence with him, I think I wrote down, hold on, let me see. Oh, that's what I put down too. When you're sitting in silence with God, and you're listening for his voice, don't be alarmed when it just sounds like you. Okay, a lot of people always say that. It's like, well, I don't know how to hear from God. I'm not sure if I'm hearing from God. And it's like, you know, he sounds like you. His spirit lives inside you. So when he's wants to say something to you, it's just gonna sound like you. It's gonna sound like your thoughts. And you're gonna be like, well, how am I supposed to know if it's me or if it's God? If God lives on the inside of you, he's able to speak right through you and it's going to sound like you. Like, I feel like a lot of the times we're trying to separate the very thing that God is putting together. He's like, I said we're one. I said I live on the inside of you. Like, so why are you trying to separate our thoughts? The whole point of us walking this thing out is to become more like him anyway. So the whole point is that our thoughts become like his thoughts. Like, we're trying to renew our mind to that daily. Like, that literally is the point. Gosh, you went through mad journals too, daughter. God. Oh no, you're fine. You're good. I'm just kind of talking fast, and then I'd be moving all over the place. So don't worry. The Lord wills. If the Lord wills, yeah, that's true. Exactly. Like Lord willing. That's how this season of my life has been. Like every time I try to plan to go somewhere or want to do something, it's like I started noticing certain things would get shut down that I wanted to do. And I'm like, dang, like what's going on? But I'm like, okay. So I just started saying, like, well, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I would like to make plans. I'm down for it if God says it's cool. Like, because I really don't know if I'm going to be able to go or not. There's been like select things that he lets me do or is like fine with me doing. And then other things he just shuts it down. So that verse, James 4:15, is legit. It really is. Write it down. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you liked it, man. That write it down video hit me too. Like, I swear I go back and watch these videos sometimes and I'm like, because sometimes you forget. Like, I forget the stuff that God said at the time. And it's like it hit perfect then, but it's like I have to go back sometimes and rewatch them. And it's like it'll hit me again. Like, because at the time when I made that video, it just blew my mind. Cause I'm like, man, how easily we forget the stuff that God is telling us. How easily we forget, like, the revelation he's given us, or maybe he wants us to do a certain thing a certain way. And it's like, if we're not writing this stuff down, bro, we're not going to remember. I can't even remember my grocery list. Like, how am I supposed to remember what God said in detail at 6 a.m.? Like, it's not going to happen. So, writing it down has been clutch for me. Speaking of writing it down, I wrote down in my journal what I was supposed to cover today. Let me see. Um, okay, so I think I'm on track. But yeah, like, again, with like I was telling you at the beginning, like, when I got on, I really planned to talk about something completely different for today. Like, I had a whole different mindset of what I wanted to speak on. And it just really cracks me up how God does things. Like, all day, it's like I thought I had the idea of what to talk about. And I should have known this morning when he like shifted everything and gave me the whole vision or the whole download this morning and then kept confirming his word throughout the day, that he was most likely going to have me speak about just spending time with him and being intentional about, hearing his voice. Like, oh yeah, I reread my journals too. That's a good one. I have to go back and reread my ones from, like, I wanted to start back from when I first, or before I first left my job. So like December, and just check those journals. Cause the stuff, even from that, like, I'd be seeing these different full circle moments, how God really connected the dots from back then to now. Like, it blows my mind how he does that. And there's so many little details that I feel like I would forget if I hadn't wrote it down, you know. But it's just important to do. It's important to keep track of it. Um, while we're in this season and everything seems uncertain and nothing that God is calling us to do seems traditional. Like me quitting my job, a career I was in for 15 years that I loved, to do I didn't know what. I just knew God said leave, without another position, without, like, at the time he was telling me to go towards art. I wasn't selling art at the time. I didn't know what type of art I want to do. I didn't know anything about that. All I knew at the time is, okay, this is what I was doing, and God is telling me it's time to go now. It's time to leave now, and time to follow him now. And even then, if I wouldn't have been intentional, like, I kept going on fast for like a period of time. I just kept fasting, like, for maybe 2 weeks at a time. But during those fasts, I would be intentional about setting a specific time to meet with God, which I hadn't really done that before. But I was like, you know what? I got some stuff I got to understand. I need to make sure I'm hearing him clearly, because if he's telling me to leave my job, I need to make sure I'm hearing this directly from him, because if I know it's him, then I'll stand on it regardless of whoever says whatever. Like, I'll stand on it. So, like, during that time, I would, I would set a specific time, whether it was in the morning or in the evening. And that would be the time that I would set to wake up, to get my Bible, get my journal, and just sit with God in his presence. Now, typically I would start out still, with my regular prayers. And I did begin to just kind of write out my prayers, which is 9 times out of 10, my journaling is literally just talking to God. It's writing out my prayers or what's on my mind that morning or whatever, maybe something's weighing on me or I'm uncertain about something. I write that all down. And then, like, from there, of course, I go through like my verse of the day. I don't know if y'all do the Bible app. Do any of y'all have that Bible app? It's the one with the little brown book or whatever. But I use that Bible app all the time. I love to go on there and get my verse of the day, because it just kind of starts my day and gives me a verse to start with. And a lot of times God will use that to direct me to something else, or he'll say something in that verse that speaks, directly to me. But during the season of like trying to feel more certain in my uncertainty, I had to make sure when I did say I was going to meet with God at a certain time, I met up with him. Like, just like if I was trying to meet a friend somewhere, if I was hooking up with a friend and we were going to go kick it or go out to eat, and I say I'm going to be there, then I'm going to be there. So I did the same thing with God. And it was so cool to see how he rewarded that time. like just by picking a time. Doesn't matter what time it is, but whatever time you say you're gonna meet with God and sit with him and talk to him or just sit and listen to him, then stick to it. Just stick to it. Just show up and let God do what he does. And it's like every time I would do that, I mean, he just really began to say some stuff to me, and like the clarity he would bring. I don't know how many times I would wake up and I'm spending time with God and he gives me a certain verse and I'm going through that verse and he gives me this whole download on something. And then I go online or I'm on YouTube and I come across somebody's video who's speaking to the very heart of what it is God said to me. The confirmation I needed at just the right time, the understanding on something that he may have said to me before, like the direction, like it just all would come and fall into alignment. And I noticed if I start my day that way, if I give God a chance to talk to me at the beginning of the day before I get started and going to do what I'm going to do, then I can see his handprint on so many more things throughout the day. I can see how he's talking to me. I can see how there's certain things that he'll make, stand out to me so that I can understand or have a better understanding, I should say, of what it is he's trying to say or where he's trying to lead me. It's so much harder to know your next step, especially when you really can't ask anybody else. Like stepping out on faith, you usually don't necessarily have somebody else that you can look to and say, hey, did this go like this? Did you experience this same thing? Are you going through this? Because half the time they're looking at you like you crazy anyway, because they're like, why are you doing the things that you're doing the way you're doing them? That doesn't make logical sense. It doesn't make earthly sense. And you're like, I know it don't necessarily make sense to me all the time either, but I'm doing it because I know it's what God is calling me to do. And I know it makes sense to him, and he can see the future. He can see down the line. He can see my whole life. I can't see 2 minutes down the road. So like, what do I look like relying on the way I would want to do it just because it seems right for me? I can't see all that. So when you're in that season, it's so important to be able to connect with God, because he's the only person that can really reassure you. He's the only person who can direct your steps. The only one who knows exactly how you're feeling and can speak to your direct situation without leaving you feeling like you're, crazy. Like, I'm telling you. And this is really what caused me to want to come on and share the stuff that I share on YouTube and be able to talk about the things that I'm going through during the journey in hopes to help somebody else. Because I'm noticing, and I started to notice as I got on the journey, that there were so many people that actually were going through the same thing. There were so many people that did recently quit their job or pivot careers completely out the blue. And everybody was kind of like on their own thing. It seemed like everybody was kind of isolated in their own little section, not knowing that there are other people out here going through the same thing. That you could have that same, community or connection with people just by opening your mouth. If people don't know what you're going through, if you're not sharing your story with other people, one, it doesn't help anybody else. And two, you don't know if somebody else could be helping you. You don't know if somebody else can be in the same season going through the same thing and might need that same community that you need. And for me, even though going live, like I tell you all the time, still makes me uncomfortable. Hopefully one day it won't make me so uncomfortable, but it does. It helps when y'all comment because I don't feel like I'm sitting here alone. Like it definitely helps. So yeah, make sure y'all keep talking to me. But it's just like when you're stepping out to do this stuff, you need other people. You can do so much on your own, and you're going to be alone most of the time anyway. Like God wants to do this one-on-one with you for the most part, but still just having that community of people who actually understand what it is you're going through. Like they're in it with you. Maybe y'all are building at the same time. Maybe you just pivoted at the same time. Maybe someone else has been on the journey a little longer, or maybe someone else is just starting, but like it helps when you have each other. It helps when you're stepping out to do this faith walk that is not easy in the first place. Oftentimes doesn't have a set precedent of how things should go. You're really relying on what God is telling you. Like you need the community. You need people like just in your corner. Sometimes it's social media, sometimes it's YouTube. Like we literally need each other at this time. But more than anything, we need to make sure we're just able to hear what it is God is saying. The more time you spend with him, the more intentional you are about not just praying and asking for all the things, even though he wants us to ask, just like I said in the last video, he wants us to ask him for stuff. And that's important too. But if we're not making time to actually sit and listen to what he has to say back to us, then how do we get the answer? How do we hear what God is saying? How do we get the direction and have the next steps if we don't take the time to listen? It's like I often equate it to like a phone call. If you call one of your girlfriends or somebody on the phone, and like the girlfriend just talks the whole time, the whole time, the whole time. And then right when you get ready to say something back, she got to go. And it's like, how many times do we do that with God? How many times do we pick up the phone and hit him up and tell him all our problems and run down all the things we need and all the things that are stressing us on this journey? But then we don't stay on the line long enough to hear his response and hear the answer and hear, the person who has the answers to our problem. So, whatever you do, just make sure you take the time to listen. Take the time to hear what it is God is saying to you. And I can't say necessarily that the journey gets easier, because I will tell you, once you round up and you feel like you end in one journey, it's just going to be the beginning of the next. So I don't necessarily think it gets easier, but I think the longer you are on the journey, you kind of learn the ebbs and flow of it. You learn how to kind of be still when you don't necessarily know the next steps and not freak out. You learn how to be patient and take your time because God is saying pause on something, and you learn how to do it his way. But there's going to be a constant stretching. There's going to be a constant season of, uncomfortability, because if God allows us to stay comfortable where we are, we'll never go where he's sending us. Bottom line. So the more we're hearing from him, the more direction we can have, the more clarity we'll get, and the more peace we can have as we're stepping out on this journey. So y'all, I think I didn't talk myself to death. So no, what? Correction. I didn't talk myself to life because I don't speak like that. So I'm going to get off here. But if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. I would so appreciate it. And if you want to connect with me more, you can follow me on Instagram at @fullcirclefaith_. Don't forget the underscore. And it's also in my bio here, so you can see the link directly to my site. Just going to throw this out there. I'm thinking about possibly kind of getting together a little group, maybe something on Zoom, so we could actually talk to each other. And it's not just me like ranting the whole time. But I'm still kind of working out the kinks on that. So we'll see. But I am considering something like that. I think it would be kind of cool just to be able to chat back and forth, share our journeys, share our testimony, and, just share what God is currently doing in our lives so we can encourage one another while we're doing this thing. Okay. Thank y'all for being on. I so appreciate y'all. But let me go ahead and get off here. So I think I might try to go live again. I'm doing this really, like I told y'all from the beginning, I'm doing it out of obedience to what God is telling me to do. So I may be going live more often, or at least for this time period. If he tells me to go live again tomorrow, then I'll be back tomorrow. And I will remember to post that in the little community section. And I'll probably post it on my Instagram too, with Eastern Standard Time, because that's what I'm in. So, all right, y'all. I hope you have a good night, and I will talk to y'all later. Bye.